We're very pleased that we have an opportunity to have an on-stage conversation with some of our guests. We want to get in as much information as we can and to talk about as much as we can. So please join me now in welcoming Branford Marsalis. Producer Tanya Davis. Producer Bruce Cohen. And George C. Wolfe. Thank you all for being with us, and congratulations on an amazing film. We have a lot to cover, so I'd like to just jump right in. George, I was wondering why now? Why can we make this film about Bayard Rustin now, and why is it so important?
Well, why now? Because it should have been done
Yes.
50 years ago.
Yes.
Separate from that, but there's a grace. There's a grace that he has. There's an expansive heart that he has. There's a ferocity of commitment. There's this unbelievable sense of responsibility for others, and the thing which is what he does for me, he turns activist into a verb, it's what you do. It's not what you say you are, it's what you do. It's how you invest, how you make sure that you are doing every single thing that you possibly can to make the planet, the moment, the country, the city, wherever you live, better for others, for those that you love, and for those that you don't know. And so that's why him as a beacon of a possibility of what the human condition can be is so important. It's why it's important to me.
Understood. Yeah. Tanya, this film is executive produced by Michelle and Barack Obama with their company Higher Ground. Why was this important that this be the first film they make?
Well, for every reason that George just said. When the company began nearly 5 years ago, it began under the premise of let's tell stories that are within the value set of the Obamas, with artists and filmmakers who are living that value set every day in their lives and making excellent work, such as George C. Wolfe, and telling stories about the people who should be honored and the stories that we should be telling and that we should be teaching in our schools and learning as students and as citizens. And so when Bruce called, and Bruce is a producer I'd always admired, frankly, always wanted to work with. His work on Milk and all of these other films had inspired me as a younger person, and he said, let's tell the story of Bayard Rustin with George C. Wolfe directing. And so it was actually a very short and easy phone call.
Yes, of course. Thank you for making that call. And so it was you that brought the production there too, and what was the origin of your interest in it?
Dustin Lance Black and Julian Brees, who were the screenwriters, Lance had sent me the script. We had worked together on Milk, and I had known who Bayard was, but as we started talking about the project to people, it was quickly emphasized to me that almost no one knew who he was. And I remember thinking, well, I know one person who knows who he is, and that was President Obama, because he had given Bayard Rustin the Presidential Medal of Freedom on the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, which is cool because 2 Mondays ago was the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington. So it's exactly 10 years since President Obama had given Bayard the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then in one of the great moments when the universe shined down, Higher Ground had opened their doors about a month before that. So that's what gave us the idea to send the script to Tonya and to the Obamas, and the rest, hopefully, will be history, because the dream is that people will now know who Bayard Rustin is.
Meant to be. Branford, in the film, your beautiful original score is complemented by the addition of an original song by Lenny Kravitz called Road to Freedom.
Yes.
Can you speak about how these two pieces of music celebrate Bayard Rustin, how they complement and underscore what he was?
Well, I think the whole idea is to, well, for the score, it's really relative to the film. So
Yeah.
it's relative to Coleman Domingo's excellent portrayal of Bayard.
Yeah.
I couldn't allow my, personal feelings about what Bayard means historically, because there's a film that's up there, and I have to respond to that.
Yeah.
I think Lenny's song is great because, though we are in a far better place than we were 60 years ago, being the United States as a nation. I guess it's fair to say that we still are globally, when you look at the situations that are happening in the world right now, whether it's Afghanistan or Ukraine or the United States or things that are happening in Canada, we're still very slowly on the road to freedom, so it is very appropriate.
Absolutely, thank you.
I'd just like to jump in quickly and say one of the really true joys for Tony and I on this project was getting to watch George and Branford work together. They've done several beautiful projects, and it's such a beautiful give and take collaboration because sometimes George sends Branford picture and Branford composes to that, and sometimes Branford sends George music and George edits to the music. So it was this incredible back and forth watching the film come together with these two great artists.
That is remarkable. Well, Bruce, can you talk a little bit about recreating the March on Washington? What were the challenges in doing that?
COVID. COVID and COVID. We knew that we filmed most of the movie in Pittsburgh, and we had built the set of the Lincoln Memorial in Pittsburgh, so we were able to film the speeches in Pittsburgh, but then we knew we needed the Lincoln Memorial for the Washington Monument scenes and for getting the scenes of the march getting ready and the big crowd scenes, and we put an entire production, thanks to our incredible line producer Alex and Liv, our production executive, are both here. Put the whole unit together, got to Washington, COVID struck us, we couldn't do it. We turned to the National Park Service and said, great, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and they said, it's available again in 7 months. And then the same thing happened a second time. And so finally, the third time, we got to do it, but the third time was a charm, and I think we will all remember for the rest of our lives that thrill of recreating the march. We're at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. We have hundreds of extras, thanks to our brilliant costume designer, Tony Leslie James, and incredible production designer, Mark Ricker, and Tobias, our great DP, recreated the look so exactly in many ways as to what people looked like, what they were wearing, what the buttons were, what the signs were. Yes. And so it was really thrilling to watch the march come to life.
It was thrilling to watch. Thank you. So, George, we have to talk about Coleman Domingo. So much, right? It doesn't feel like there could be anyone else. Can you speak a bit about how he came to the project and working with him?
Well, it was an interesting thing as the script was evolving, as everything was evolving. He was always a thought. He was always a thought, and then I just find myself, and I would be looking at the script and I'd scribbling and making notes and making comments on it, and I go, that sounds like Coleman should do that, and then I'd go a little bit further, and then I'd go like, oh, I could see Coleman in that moment, and then it just kept on going until it was Coleman. So it was a wonderful realization that we found that the center was there. And then I always rehearse. I have 2 weeks of rehearsal, and every day, and bringing everybody in and starting to create as much as possible this safe space. And then the actors have done Coleman in particular did a tremendous degree of work. Coleman's a baritone, Bayard was a tenor. He studied his speech, he did all of that. And then you put him in a room with Jeffrey Wright or an Audra McDonald, and then these moments of truth and vulnerability and and then they start surprising each other. And then it starts to build and explode from there, because I'm a firm believer that an audience can tell when they are in the presence of a truth that you have recycled from another project. And I believe they can tell when they're in the presence of a truth that was discovered just for them. So that rehearsal time is the time for all of us involved to make ourselves as vulnerable as we possibly can to the moments that we are called upon to deliver, need to be as a director, as a designer, or as an actor. And so that's what that 2-week time period begins. And then every single day, before anything happens, I clear the set, and then we rehearse and play. So that therefore, if everybody is comfortable inside of being naked, emotionally naked, not another kind of naked, so don't call the SAG and report that there was a naked set happening here. There's a naked heart.
Yes.
That everybody is wearing. And Coleman at the center of that embodied that fully. And then you put him in a scene with Audrey. Then you put him in a scene with Amel, who's playing MLK. And it's just, there's a ripple dynamic that begins to happen. And I think you're watching the fragility of the human heart on display. And hopefully that's what we
It is absolutely all on the screen. Thank you so much for
Thank
that
you.
work.
Thank you.
Maybe backtracking from those 2 weeks of rehearsal that you have, can you speak about how closely you may have worked with the screenwriters and the development process with them?
Closely. Yeah. No, it's you know, what ends up happening, it's like the character Dr. Anna. You know, I was just doing some research, and she says, every day my father asks me, what have you done to make yourself useful? What an amazing statement. What a burden, but what an amazing statement for a parent to say to a child. And so you find that jewel, and it has to be there. Or it just has to. So the people, it was interesting. So there is the work that the writers were doing, but it was also the lives that the people lived. And the statements that they made, that they kept on informing the evolution of the story and the script. Ella Baker is a phenomenal figure in the civil rights movement. Once again, that people know very little about, but fierce and determined and just unrelenting in her desire to make America better. And so when you read something of a thought that they had, or you look at a moment of an interview, so it's the imagination and the smartness of the people who were involved in the storytelling. And then there's just the raw, pure truth of the lives that these people lived. You know, even Adam Clayton Powell, who was brilliantly witty and complicated, but brilliant and extraordinary. So there was a back and forth between the reality of the lives and the imagination of the writers and the storytellers involved.
Incredible process. We are very pleased to have those 150 students that you mentioned in the introduction. We'd like very much to ask if one of them has a question. We only have time for one. Is there anyone there that would like to ask a question? Yes, right there, please. She's representing POV Films. What an amazing question. What advice would you give future writers and directors who want to make beautiful stories like you have?
Be ferocious. Don't let anybody tell you no. Dig, and then dig, and then dig some more. Find people, collaborators, who are smart and who are challenging and who are storytellers. I call myself a storyteller more than I call myself a director. I mean, I call myself a director because I'm the director. But people, you know, working with the DP or a production designer who aren't just into making things pretty, but they are as consumed with getting at the truth and what they contribute. So working with really smart collaborators and working with people who will, as much as possible, create a safe environment for you. And if they don't, then you shouldn't work with them because it won't end well. So be smart and discerning. You know, I think of work as like a baby. Now, you know, God willing, the baby is walking and flying. But in the beginning, you have to protect that work as if it is so delicate and so fragile, and you can see all the muscles there, but they're being formed. So you have to be ferocious in your protection of this little tiny thing that hopefully is going to grow into this piece of storytelling or art that will empower other people. So one of your main jobs, in addition to doing all the hard work, is protecting the journey of its evolution, if that helps.
We're so proud to have George C. Wolfe and his collaborators here with us. Thank you so much for bringing this film to Toronto.
Thank
We're
you.
so grateful
Thank
to
you
have
very
you
much.
here. Congratulate these people, please, on a wonderful film.